Hello there. This is James, and you're watching OneRoyal, and it's live. In today's program, I want to talk about a very key moment happening this week for the G7 as that kicks off today, where they will find out if indeed the US president is friend or foe. As well as that, I want to talk about how the market is ticking slightly higher, even though we've had a weekend of missiles and airstrikes happening in the Middle East and why that is. As well as that, the big question about the big day happening this week, which of course is the Fed interest rate decision. But before I get into all of that, don't forget, these little videos are for educational purposes only, and in no way whatsoever should they be taken as financial advice. I always suggest you do your own research, do your own due diligence, and of course, there are the risks at hand before entering any trade. With that out of the way, let's get started. So, question I have to ask everybody, first of all, is this G7 meeting the moment of truth, the G7? Because are they going to find out once and for all, is Trump with them or against them? That's the big question. Because the G7 kicks off today in Canada, and this is the group of world leaders from the largest and most advanced economic powers. These include the following countries: the US, obviously, UK, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. There will be other countries, other leaders who've also been invited to attend this event. And these countries, or these leaders from these countries, include the likes of Australia, Brazil, Mexico, Indonesia, Ukraine, South Africa, and South Korea. Now, of course, the big question is going to really be top of the agenda in this G7 meeting will be several things. Number one, which is something which has occurred over the last 4 days or so, is of course going to be the de-escalation of the Israel-Iran conflict. Also going to be discussed in this G7 is going to be Ukraine, Russia, conflict, with many like the UK, Germany, and France wanting to put tougher sanctions on Russia, whether or not they will get US backing on that. And of course, tariffs. Because don't forget, Trump's tariffs remain a source of very deep tension between the allies and the US. And here's not the only thing. Sometimes history repeats itself, because G7 in the past hasn't been a really great event when Trump has attended, because Trump last attended the G7 in Canada back in 2018. This ended in an argument with the then Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, and his refusal to sign the traditional communique, which signals the G7's unity. He refused to sign it last time. Now, there is going to be no communique this time to avoid this issue, but it's going to be very interesting to see if Mark Carney, now the Prime Minister of Canada, can tame Trump, so to speak. And there will be several meetings with Trump, obviously, okay, as leaders will be desperate to try and get some sort of, gain some ground in trade deals. And these sort of discussions are expected to take place. However, the market is not expected to see any deals actually struck, finalized, or agreed during this event. And this is a worrying thing, okay, because the 9th of July is fast approaching. It's fast coming upon us. Don't forget, that is when the delay of reciprocal tariffs expire. Now, the market's asking the question, And I'm asking this question. I'm asking this question to you good people as well. Let me know what you think. Bear in mind, we have seen no concrete trade deals. We've seen a blueprint of a trade deal between the US and the UK, which is the easiest partner to trade with because the trade surplus between the UK and the US is minimal. So that's very easy to do. But we see nothing else. Nothing else from Japan. We saw Japan's talks, nothing. We saw EU started to talk. That fell apart. And we also saw China, which of course is sometimes they're friends, sometimes they're not friends. So again, adds to the confusion. Now, this is going to be really key because, like I say, the 9th of July is fast approaching. And the market's asking the question, what happens at midnight on the 9th of July? Okay, are we going to see Liberation Day Part 2 and how the market reacted then? Now, there is some interesting reports that the EU is trying to make a deal with the US. Now, there's a report comes from a German newspaper suggests that the EU are willing to accept the broad line 10% tariffs from the US on all EU exports. All EU exports. And in return for that, they will cut tariffs on US-made vehicles and may ease some technical and legal hurdles to make it easier for the US manufacturers to sell their cars in Europe. Because here's the thing, okay? European roads, okay, and European sort of like road structure and all that is a lot smaller than the US, okay? And a lot of US cars are a lot bigger than a lot of European models, okay? So there is a lot of, like I say, restrictions, both technical and legal, on the size of the cars allowed to be driven in the EU. Okay, like for example, the prime example, like the Cybertruck, for example, is considered far too big and far too dangerous to be driven in the EU, and they don't allow it. You know, plus the sharp edges as well for accidents. However, if they're willing to try and change some technical and legal hurdles for these US cars and reduce tariffs, this could be part of a deal they could get over the line with the US. And here's the other thing. They've also offered to ban all purchases of Russian natural gas, potentially then creating more demand for US producers. But here's the thing, though this is indeed a good deal, potentially a good deal they're willing to do, okay, there is no agreement as yet to be made. So it will be interesting indeed to see if we can see any slight headway in this G7 meeting. And it'd be really interesting to see the overall behavior of Trump to his fellow leaders. So like I say, G7 will find out potentially if President Trump is indeed a friend to them or potentially a foe to them. That will be hopefully the big question being answered over the next couple of days. Anyway, moving on to actually how the market is currently reacting at the moment. Well, it's ticking slightly higher. Now, the reason for this, and this is all because, or this is all despite the fact we've seen exchange of missile strikes between Israel and Iran throughout the whole weekend. In fact, I live in Cyprus. I actually saw, from a great distance, obviously, a lot of the missiles activity twice, both on Saturday and Sunday. But it's been ongoing throughout the weekend. But the market is ticking higher. You know, as opposed to Friday, when obviously this all started, the market went into a bit of a panic and dropped. Today, it's reversed that attitude, and it's actually jumped up a little bit. The reason for that, obviously, is the optimism. Now, there's optimism that this conflict between Israel and Iran won't spill out across the region. Won't spread out across the region. As well as that, there is also hope that both Iran and Israel could make some sort of deal, not straight away, according to Trump, but in the future. This is what Trump had to say. He said this: there's a good chance of an Israel-Iran peace deal, but hostilities may need to play out first. Sometimes they have to fight it out, and we're going to see what happens. Fight it out. Very interesting choice of words on that. And as well as that, oil, which was gaining, so it shot 10% up on Friday, and was up 5% in the open today, it's practically lost majority of its gains. As for now, following obviously 4 days of attacks across both countries, despite this, there is signs that critical export infrastructure has currently been spared, which means supply is not going to be affected. So that's currently why oil is ticking down as well. So in general, we have a bit of optimism. But anyway, enough of me talking about that. Let's go and have a quick look at the actual market as it stands at the moment. Okie dokie. So start off with the S&P 500, which had a bad day on Friday, like a lot of the market. You know, Friday the 13th was not lucky for the market. But for now, it's opened with a little bit of gap, again with the optimism, back above the 6,000 point level at 6,038 points, currently up 1.3%. If you look at on a daily as well, we can still see, you know, like I say, there is still a bullish momentum with the S&P 500. So there's still a lot of optimism on at the moment. I mean, look, you know, a fair bit away from the all-time high. Looked like we were getting momentum to get there. At the moment, it looks fairly sideways currently on this Monday. If we look at the NASDAQ as well, look at the NASDAQ. Again, that's opened again with a gap higher, currently up 1.42%. Again, it's just a bounce after the sell-off on Friday. Long-term wise as well on the daily as well, we can see as well. It's still very much still slightly bullish in the long term as well. And we can say the same about the Dow as well, up by 509 points currently as we speak, currently up 1.21%. Moving on to the Mag 7, who, like I say, across the board, it was a bad day on Friday. Everybody got spooked. The market got spooked across the board. But we have, like I say, Tesla up, today's recovered. Meta up 2.75%. Microsoft up 1.18%. I will do a special on Microsoft because I'm very interested in Microsoft at the moment for a few things they're looking to do, which I think Microsoft could prove to be potentially an interesting opportunity. I will do a special on that. Amazon also up today. Alphabet up 0.55%. Nvidia 1.80%, and Apple up 0.72%. We look across then to, say, the metals. Gold. Of course, we're going to talk about gold. We're going to talk about gold. Beginning of the session, because of all the drama and all the violence we've had, or unfortunate violence that we had over the weekend, gold did again test that all-time high level, this key level here of $3,445 an ounce. And that level has held. Now, again, like I've said beforehand, because of the optimism sneaking into the market that this conflict will not expand across the region, we are seeing it being sold off again slightly. However, this is the other point I wanted to make. This is the third time, okay? The third time it's attempted to hit this resistance, okay? And even though we are seeing a sell-off currently at the moment, because of the optimism, we can still clearly see it's still bullish of the trend. For me, the key areas to keep an eye on, potential support is $3,286. We might see, if we do get de-escalation of this conflict, okay, and return of optimism and key economic data and what we're going to discuss in a minute, we might see a little bit of sell-off. But reason the long term, I'm still keeping a very close eye on gold and this key resistance level. 3 times it's tried, 3 times it's held, but this key area of interest is $3,466. Crude, like I say again, spiked all the way to around about $77 on the back of this conflict since it started, but practically almost now is wiped off all the gains because supply lines are still very much intact, currently trading at $68.96. If we can then move on to currencies, euro dollar maintains its great 2025 so far against the dollar. So we are seeing weaker dollar because no safe haven appeal, so to speak. Euro now trading at 1.116. 1.116. So the euro is still, holding its own very much against the dollar. The British pound is the same, now trading at 136. 136 against the US dollar, against the greenback. As you can see, again, both pound and the euro are having a good, slight bullish rally against the dollar. And we can see that again, of course, with the dollar index, because without the safe haven desire, which it got, like I said, you saw that on Friday, it managed to bounce back or ticked off, bounce off a 2-year low on Friday. It's back under pressure again today, now trading at 97 points, because like I say, the safe haven, desire of the greenback is no longer there currently. Right, I want to move on to something else about the rest of this week, which is happening. Obviously, we've got a lot of data coming out. Like I said last week, until Friday, the market is beginning now to look more at economic data again, as opposed to tweets or posts made by Trump about trade and tariff. But we got some big events coming out. Starting on Tuesday, we have US retail sales, which would be interesting to look at. Wednesday, though, is the big day. First of all, we have UK and EU consumer price index. Important. It is, especially if you trade in the sterling and the euro. However, the market will be looking at one thing, and one thing only, and that, of course, would be the Fed interest rate decision and press conference. Now, we've had a lot of positive data. Like I said last week, there were signs the market is beginning to look more at economic data like the good old days, as opposed to what Trump's going to post next. Okay, we had a lot of positive data. First of all, we had signs that inflation is cooling. The labor market still fairly stable, slowing but stable. And for once, the consumer confidence survey actually was good. It bounced back to 60.5 from the previous number of 52.2, which goes to show that the US consumer or the US public is beginning to accept that tariffs are here to stay, and they're not the big, scary bogeyman like they all thought initially. So that was signs of that. But good data. Shouldn't this lead to the Fed cutting interest rates? And that's going to be the big question. Will the Fed cut interest rates? And the answer to the matter is, if you look at this little survey here, okay, the market really thinks it's very unlikely. In fact, about 97.9% of those asked thought there's going to be no cut happening this Friday. This Wednesday, sorry. No cut at all. Okay, and they really don't expect the Fed to move on this. They are expecting the Fed to carry on doing more waiting and seeing, which is going to annoy somebody in the White House. However, that's their prerogative. Now, what I think is, I think the Fed the cut interest rate decision itself, it's not going to be a big event, but the press conference is going to be interesting. What they have to say in the press conference, especially in relation to recent data, and also what they can see happening in the future, the tail end of the year, which they're more interested in. And this was also at the same time give an idea if maybe, just maybe, we might see an interest rate cut come September. So that would be interesting. Anyway, signing the week off as well. We've got other data after that, but that's the main event. It's going to be that. But after that, as well as that, we had Thursday, which is the S&B interest rate decision, and the Bank of England interest rate decision. The S&B may act. Interesting to know if you're a Swiss franc trader. Bank of England, unlikely to cut rates again, as they did cut rates previous. So be prepared for that. Don't forget, of course, this is a live show. So you can ask me questions anytime you wish, etc. Or more importantly, share with me your own opinion. I'd like to hear what you think, what your view is, what you think is going to happen in this G7 conference. What do you think is going to happen in this conflict? Are we likely not to see it spread? Is the market right to be optimistic? Where do you see gold going in the future? Are you a bull like me, thinking it might go higher in the future, in the long term, potentially? Or are you now thinking that gold's at the current right price? We're not going to see many gains made in the future. Or what do you think about the euro? Let me know your views and your opinions. As well as that, if you're not already part of the OneRoyal family, and you'd like to know a little bit more about us, you can click on the link in the description below and you can find out a bit more. And maybe, just maybe, you'd like to become a member of the OneRoyal family. As well as that, if you are watching me on YouTube and you like this sort of thing, by all means, subscribe if you like. Hit the notification button so you know next time we're going live, which is every single day. And if you like this type of content, and more importantly, you put up with my over-the-top enthusiasm for the market, by all means, give me one of these. It's nice to know that you like what we do. As well as that, one other point I want to make, if you are indeed, I've noticed a lot of people go back and watch the recordings, which is great. I prefer any type, all types of support. If you are watching the recording and you do have a question or a comment, put it in the comment section below. I will see it and I will reply to it next time I go live on air. Like I say, which is every single day, which of course will be tomorrow. Okay, if there is no questions or no comments people want to share, which is not a problem. Not a problem at all. Let me have a little sip of water. Usually say if there is no questions then, or no comments, not a problem. Leaves me to then wrap up and basically say, don't forget, these little videos are for educational purposes only. And in no way whatsoever shall be taken as financial advice. I always suggest you do your research, do your due diligence, and of course, know the risks at hand before entering any trade. Till next time, every single one of you, trade. I lost my mouse then. Trade safe.